Welcome to my third and final video covering scales and keys. After this video, I'll begin to get into more intermediate topics about music theory, like chords, intervals, ear training, minor scales, modes, and different time signatures. If you haven't already seen parts 1 and 2 of Scales and Keys, you might want to watch those first, as there's a lot of information that will make this video easier to understand. I will link parts 1 and 2 in the description. In this video, I will finish discussing the rest of the major scales, as well as reviewing key signatures and the circle of fourths. I will also give a basic introduction of intervals. To learn the rest of the major scales, let's review the rules of scales, as well as the rules of major scales discussed in part 1. Remember, each scale starts on the note that is the same as its name. So when playing a C major scale, you will start on C. Scales also use all 7 letters of the musical alphabet, with no repeating notes within 1 octave. Major scales will follow the pattern of root, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, with accidentals used as needed to follow the other rules of scales. In the first part of Scales and Keys, we learned the C major scale and the F major scale. To review, the notes in the C major scale are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C. The notes in the F major scale are F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, and F. Using this pattern, along with the rules of scales, we know that the notes in the G major scale must be G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. For the key of D major, we know that the key has 2 sharps, so the notes in the D major scale are D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D. The same applies for the flat keys of B flat, whose notes are B flat, C, D, E flat, F, G, A, B flat, and E flat, whose notes are E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, C, D, and E flat. Before discussing the rest of the major scales, I'll give you 1 minute to try to figure out the notes in the B major scale and the A flat major scale. Alright, let's see how you did. The notes in the B major scale are B, C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, and B. The notes in the A flat major scale are A flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, G, and A flat. If you are having trouble fully understanding scales, I have linked some resources in the description below to practice all major scales. After some practice, you are sure to be quite familiar with the major scale family. Now for the remaining scales. The notes in the A major scale are A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A. Following the pattern of whole steps and half steps, the notes in the E major scale are E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. The notes in the F sharp major scale are F sharp, G sharp, A sharp, B, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, and F sharp. We need to use E sharp in the F sharp major scale because there cannot be both F natural and an F sharp in the F sharp major scale, as it violates the rules of scales. The notes in the D flat major scale are D flat, E flat, F, G flat, A flat, B flat, C, and D flat. And finally, the notes in the G flat major scale, which is the enharmonic scale of F sharp major, are G flat, A flat, B flat, C flat, D flat, E flat, F, and G flat. And just like that, we have covered all of the major scales. This diagram shows all of the major scales with their letter names, note names, and key signatures. Here is an updated diagram of the circle of fourths. This has everything we have talked about in all 3 parts of Scales and Keys: the circle of fourths, key signatures, the order of sharps, and the order of flats. This diagram shows the major scale that goes with each major key on the circle of fourths. With both of these images, this gives you all the information you need to know about major scales and major keys. Now, let's move on to talking about intervals. I briefly discussed intervals when talking about the circle of fourths and the construction of scales, but now we will go more in depth. Understanding how intervals work will help you to understand different scales, chords, and pretty much anything having to do with harmony in music. In part 1 of Scales and Keys, I introduced the minor second, or half step, as the smallest interval in the standard tuning system that we use. If you start on any note and move up or down in minor seconds, it will play all of the 12 notes chromatically, meaning that the space in between the notes is the smallest possible naturally occurring interval. The other interval I discussed is the whole step, or major second. A major second is a difference of 2 half steps between each note. One half step up from C is C sharp, a second half step up from C sharp is D, so a major second from C is D. An easy way to understand intervals is to understand the concept of scale degrees. A scale degree simply refers to where a note name falls in any given scale relative to the root. In the key of E major, the second scale degree is F sharp, since F sharp is the second note in E major. Therefore, F sharp is a major second from E. All minor versions of intervals are just 1 half step lower than their major counterpart, so a minor second from E would be F natural. We still use the letter name of F as we were talking about the second scale degree of E major. In order to follow the rules of scales, we must use F rather than E sharp. Now for a new and very important interval, the third. The third is based off of the third scale degree of the starting note, and can be minor or major. A major third is the interval commonly associated with happy sounding music, while the minor third is commonly associated with sad sounding music. A major third from C is E, since E is the third scale degree of C. A minor third from C is just a half step lower than the major third, so a minor third up from C is E flat. I already talked about the perfect fourth in a previous video, but I will review it here. The fourth is considered to be one of the most consonant-sounding intervals in Western music, and unlike any of the other intervals, has no minor or major versions. A perfect fourth is the fourth scale degree of the starting note, so a perfect fourth up from D is G. Another one of the most important intervals is the fifth. There are 3 types of fifth intervals: the perfect fifth, diminished fifth, and the augmented fifth. The perfect fifth is simply the 5th scale degree up from the starting note. An augmented fifth is half a step up from a perfect fifth, while a diminished fifth is a half step down from a perfect fifth. Using this information, along with what you now know about intervals, try to figure out what a perfect fifth up from A is and what a diminished fifth up from D is. I will give you 30 seconds, and then I'll share the answers. Okay, a perfect fifth up from A is E, since E is the 5th scale degree in A. A diminished fifth up from D is A flat. Since A is a perfect fifth above D, A flat is a half step lower than A, making A flat a diminished fifth above D. The next interval we'll be discussing is the sixth. The sixth has a major and minor form. A major sixth up from C is A, since A is the 6th scale degree of C. Knowing this, we can figure that A flat is a minor sixth up from C, since A flat is a half step below A. Now for the seventh. The seventh has a minor and major form, both of which are very important to chords, which we'll talk about in a later video. Using what you already know about intervals, I'll give you 30 seconds to see if you can figure out what a major seventh up from D is and what a minor seventh up from C is. Then I'll share the answers with you. A major seventh up from D is C sharp. We know this since C sharp is the 7th scale degree of D major. A minor seventh up from C is B flat. We know this since B is the 7th scale degree of C major. B flat, a half step lower than B, must be a minor seventh up from C. The final intervals we will talk about here is the octave and unison. Unison is very simple, as the unison of any note is the same note. So, a unison from C is C, a unison from D is D, and so on. An octave is very similar to a unison, only an octave is an octave higher. So while a unison from C4 is C4, an octave from C4 is C5. Another important part of intervals is being able to read and recognize intervals in sheet music. This is pretty much the same as what we just did, but rather than just seeing the letter, you have to read the interval on the sheet music. Once you learn how to do this, you'll be able to easily read and understand chords, which we'll discuss in a later video. Let's use this as an example. First, let's identify the starting note. Since we learned how to read both treble clef and bass clef in previous videos, we can identify that this is a C in treble clef. If we want to get more specific, we can say that this is C4. Next, we will identify the note above C4. Again, since we know that we are in treble clef, this is A. More specifically, A4. Now, all we have to do is figure out the interval. Since we know we are starting from C, we will use C as our tonic. We know that A is the 6th scale degree in C major, so the interval here is a major 6th. Let's try one more example. In this example, we are in bass clef with the starting note of D3. We want to find the interval from D3 to B flat 3. We know that B is the 6th scale degree of D major, so B flat, a half step below B, must be a minor 6th up from D. Eventually, with enough practice, you'll be able to identify intervals very quickly, which will really help you to better understand chords. Another important part of music theory and intervals is a skill called ear training. Ear training is the ability to recognize intervals, chords, and even notes just by listening. Now, this is a pretty difficult concept to get a hold of, so I won't be going into it until a few videos from now, but it is easiest to begin ear training by trying to identify intervals by listening to them. This video was just an introduction to intervals and a summary of major scales and keys. In the coming videos, I will talk more about rhythm, intervals, ear training, minor scales, and minor keys. I also plan to upload some videos and shorts for practice on the materials I've covered, like rhythm, scales, keys, and intervals. I highly recommend checking out those videos as I upload them, as they will really help you to fully understand the topics I cover in these videos. Next video, I'll be going more in depth with rhythm. I have focused a lot on the melody and harmony side of music theory, but rhythm is just as important. Focusing on rhythm will also give all of us a much needed and deserved break from all this scale talk. I'll be building on some of the basic rhythm concepts I discussed in my first music theory video, so if you haven't checked that one out yet, I really recommend you see it. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving a like. It lets me know that you thought this video was helpful, and it helps put it in front of others that are interested in learning about music theory. If you know of anyone who is looking to learn music theory, please share this video with them so that they can learn along with you. To be notified when I upload more music content, or if you just want to support the channel, please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see all of you in my next video.